Welcome back to another episode of Virteva's Let's Talk podcast, the show that analyzes the newest technologies in cloud and how to manage those technologies to help your business teams be successful. My name is Scott Ledwan, and in this special edition of the podcast, we'll travel back in time to a podcast from March that reviews audience questions about Teams optimization, deployment strategy, and we'll speculate on the role of generative AI in the future of Teams and modern work. As we inch closer to Microsoft Inspire 2023, we thought it would be a good opportunity to resurface our chat with Apsidien's Jonathan Schultz, which originally aired in March of this year as an audio-only podcast. As always, I wanted to thank our early listeners and remind you that like, subscribe, or follow is really helpful for promoting the show. So please take a moment to do so if you can. That'd be much appreciated. We've also seen a lot of engagement on YouTube, which is fantastic. And we want to thank everyone that's been watching. We're also available to listen to on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and pretty much any other big podcast app that's out there. So if you prefer to listen rather than watch, you can find us there as well. Let's jump in. So John and Chris, our first question comes from Darren. He asks, what should I do if my environment is already a mess? How do I clean it up?
Yeah, I can take that one to start. First off, you're not alone. So that's the first thing you really have to understand is that happens to everybody. A lot of environments, kind of have grown over time, like we talked about, and a lot of people are kind of in that space. We'd still say it first starts with that strategy. Really keep thinking through what do you want the future state to look like? Think about, the future, and then plan for that with, we can, with the Apsidien 365 app, you can import existing teams and have it kind of rename them and reconfigure them according to your new rules programmatically. Or, things like project teams and things like that. Sometimes they quote unquote die on the vine where project ends and then the next project starts with a new template while the old one just lives its life until it's done over time.
Yeah, and I would throw in there too that John, all good points John's making, and then on top of that, I think so often the root challenge that leads to that in the first place ends up being users not being provided any sort of guidance or input to say what is the best way we should handle this, what is our proper approach as an organization for this stuff, and when they're left to make it up for themselves or not given any of that guidance, that's what results. They're each individual just sort of going with it and figuring it out on their own. So first and foremost, just coming up with that guiding principle and then making sure the users are aware, deciding what are our standards that we're going to uphold. And that isn't even like a best practice necessarily, although that's obviously worth striving for. But even just having some consistent guidance to those users, I generally find that they'll do the right thing when given that guidance. And so much of that is just the communications going out. Obviously, as we've been saying throughout this webinar, training and that sort of aspect of informing at the persona level what type of things that they would find meaningful within teams, and then making sure that in tandem or in correlation to that they're actually using it in the way that you're instructing, and then having all of the governance and stuff in place subsequent to that. So it all kind of comes hand in hand together.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Our next question, Chris, is actually for you, and it comes from Kirsten. She asks, how often should I be retraining my organization on Microsoft Teams?
Yeah, great question. And I would actually reframe that a bit. So great question, but it's not even so much retraining as it is continuous training, because so often, as we all know, Teams continues to evolve and change every month, as we noted earlier. And so it's not so much retraining as it is continued training. And not to mention, inevitably, if you're like most organizations, you have new people joining at all times of the year. And so for them, it's not retraining, it's net new training. And it's not even just on Teams itself functionally, but also, as we've been saying, all the nuances with how your company or your culture inside of your company wants to effectively leverage this kind of platform. And being that it is so multifaceted, making sure that there is that understanding of how to apply it in the ways that are desirable for the way you're planning to use it, or that the way you are using it, so that everyone's at least consistent. And so it's usually what we found in practice, whether we're doing it or organizations are doing it internally, is at least quarterly. Because if you can at least stick to that type of cadence, you're catching enough of the new stuff without it being just a monstrous pile of trying to fit a year's worth of Teams updates and stuff, not to mention just the re-education of, hey, here's the bottom line or the baseline elements of Teams that that are inherent to common knowledge for many of you, but maybe if you're new would not be. It's tough to cram all that in unless you're at least at that quarterly, if not monthly, if you can swing it, sort of basis. And the nice part is if you do it a little bit more frequently like that, it tends to be a little bit shorter and easier to consume for those users. You're not just like I was just saying, like throwing a mountain of information at them, and it gives them a little bit more chance to be introspective about how that conversation or whatever you're teaching them in that moment and that quarterly training correlates to the way they've been using it to that point, or if they're new, how they're thinking about the way it can be used for themselves in their role. So that tends to be the cadence that we try to recommend.
I'd also just add to that, building a support system for everyone to go along with the training, right? Having kind of a champion community that can take it out to others quickly and more like practically, where it applies directly to that role they're in and not just where to click in the tool in and of itself. And then that above that, you can use Viva Engage and the Microsoft tools themselves to help support that community as you kind of do that, where the continuous learning is also just people helping others that are in their same jobs, working right next to them, apply it to their role instead of just some basic click train and corporate kind of training model.
Yeah, great points, John. Fully agree.
Yep. Teams also has an early adopters program as well that you can create a custom policy for in your Teams tenant that'll give certain users in your organization, whether they be champions or members of the IT department, the ability to opt into early features to help build that training and set your users up to know what's coming down the pike.
Mm-hmm.
John, our next question comes from Melissa. She asks, Apsidien 365's app looks great, but we already use ServiceNow for handling our requests today. Can the two of those be combined together?
Yeah, absolutely is the answer. So we see organizations use a handful of tools in the enterprise stack to kind of govern their environments, control it, monitor it for regulatory purposes, things like that. And ServiceNow is definitely one of many that you can integrate with. The Apsidien 365 app has ways to integrate before requests are done in the approval side to after they've been provisioned and something else happens there. So in that scenario with ServiceNow, you could definitely start a ticket inside of ServiceNow, have ServiceNow handle the approval process or the ticketing process so it's logged correctly. But then it sends over to like the API of Apsidien 365 to still create the team or the site exactly the way you want it to. So that's the key where you let Apsidien 365 do its powerful templating and provisioning in a controlled manner, but maybe having your process controlled in the request in another tool like ServiceNow.
Great, thanks, John. All right, we've got a couple more questions here. Our next question is for Chris, from Chris, and he asks, how have you helped organizations see past Teams as just a chat tool? How do you kind of step beyond just, hey, I'm just using this like the old Skype days, as I'm just chatting back and forth between my coworkers, but occasionally I'm giving a call. How do you start to really kind of build on like the Teams tool as a service platform?
Yeah, so there's obviously the thing of just generalized training and education. And as John made the point of a minute ago, that the Champions Network often can make a big difference there. But the larger success factor, I would call it, that we've seen time and time again resonate the right way to get in front of that is the persona driven sort of way of approaching all these scenarios with those users, obviously through the conduit of training and champion networks and that sort of thing. So it's all related and has interconnected qualities, but meeting the users where they are and saying, in the context of your role and what you do for this organization, let's help you understand which aspects of that Teams platform, whether it's the file interactions, it's the planner integration, or it could be maybe how SharePoint sites themselves are embedded within different pieces. SharePoint lists is another, or excuse me, Microsoft 365 lists is another one that commonly is just not obvious to them until or unless they've been educated in the context of how their role would leverage those things, and then apply them meaningfully in their day-to-day. Once you're able to meet them at that level, we've seen it really take a different dimension of adoption and actually make them comfortable feeling like, oh, I can go and do more in here, and it's not just going to be a waste of my time, or I'm not going to stumble around and not even realize what I'm doing, or just that idea that, hey, everyone else is able to do this in here, so I can too. Sometimes nobody wants to be the first one, or they think they're breaking something or going farther than they should. Once they're given that comfortability of, hey, there's other pieces in here that go beyond chat, or on top of that, maybe just helping them understand how chat can be an enhancement to how those things are done inside of teams, so that they don't see it as, oh, they're trying to stop me from just seeing it as a chat tool and do this. It's a chat plus all these other components or pieces, and how it manifests in a way that's meaningful to them, and it makes their life easier, hopefully, or at least more effective in how they do their job. And so that persona-based format for how you train, how you develop that champions network, how you educate, how you communicate around teams, really can be the difference in driving that kind of success in our experience.
Yeah, and I would just add on the templating again, by creating these templates and adding the right tabs to these different teams that exist, to encourage people to use tools like OneNote, or a Microsoft 365 list for tracking project issues or risks. It's low-hanging fruit and helps people quickly understand there's more to this than just chat and files.
Yeah, great point.
Great. Thanks both. We have one question left. This one is a little bit less about the webinar today and more about kind of the future and all the stuff that we've been starting to see come out of AI and how that's going to be integrated in the Microsoft space. So our last question comes from Srini, and this one is actually aimed at both of you. And he asks, how do you think AI is going to affect my overall team strategy?
I'll start on maybe the request end. I definitely see how, kind of chatting kind of with these bots and then applying AI in the middle of it will help get people the right tools at the right time. So by being able to say, someone just to explain what they're trying to do, hey, I'm trying to do this with a colleague that works in another organization, blah, 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 blah. Those types of questions are some of the initial lower hanging fruit of AI these days, is like, how streaming those streams of consciousness together into certain results, and guiding people towards answers, or asking follow-up types of questions. So some of it's just chatbots, some of it's AI and chatbots, but I definitely see some of that on the intake side that can help guide people to the right tools at the right time.
Yeah, I'd certainly agree with that. And then, just to add to it, I think it'll bring a new dimension to, well, if we just stick with chat alone, let alone all the other kind of ways that this is likely to impact the world at large. But certainly in a chat context, I think it really will create that different dimension to it, where, like John was just saying, like you're interacting with a human, but then all of a sudden in the same sort of context, you can start interacting with AI at the same time. And maybe that at times will enhance the type of steps that are taken subsequent to a chat discussion occurring, where it's like, hey, we agree on something, and the AI now can be chatted in the same thread to go take actions associated with whatever we were just talking about. So things that we would have manually done as humans at that point maybe don't always become human interactions or steps that are taken subsequent to that. The AI can do it for us. And the discoverability factor, I would certainly agree with what John said. I think generally the AI functionality, and certainly in Microsoft's case with their Bing ChatGPT based AI that will inevitably be infused into all of these products, including Teams, will make it that much more likely users won't just be relegated to their limited understanding of what the capabilities are. They're going to automatically or more readily be exposed because the AI is going to bring it to them. The downstream capabilities and components that are manifest throughout the platform and beyond. Now, with that, I think becomes inevitably the caveat that we're not going to be able to stop this. And so as a result, that enhanced discoverability and that more likelihood of users getting brought information, whether they're seeking it out or not, means data governance is more critical than ever. I think that's going to be one of the biggest lessons from the AI journey, let's call it, for now over the next several years. Not certainly just within Teams, but in general, is now that information is that much more easily discoverable and surfaceable, how are we organizationally going to make sure that we have better protection of our data so that the things that are being surfaced to them aren't just, it's not just this free flow of information all over the place, good, bad, and ugly. So let's start doing more sensitivity labeling. Let's start doing more with DLP and other data governance layers so that it's kind of like the zero trust thing. Like, it's not if the data gets discovered, because it's when, with AI helping out. Under that when model, what are we doing to put layered data governance and data security underneath that, so that when it happens, it is protected, and it's not going to be mishandled. It's not going to be the janitor finding the CEO's records of this, that, or the other, and any number of other scenarios that'll probably crop up. So really powerful stuff. It's going to be really exciting. Microsoft had its Copilot announcement the other day that really already is starting the great wave of new capabilities, and it's going to be interesting. I think it'll make teams that much more prominent for companies, as they don't need to spend as a user all their time in all these other interfaces that much more intensely. It can be just living in teams and let AI do all the heavy lifting outside of that, to do things like create presentations and create brochures, or emails even. Now Teams, as the new operating system, is still centrally involved in all that, and is one less interface move out of that system that they have to go, because the AI will take care of all that for them, and they can just stay in the context of Teams throughout. So it's just really interesting stuff. There's no wise old person that can say, oh, this is how it's going to go and this is what's going to happen. It's all new to everyone. But I think if we just embrace the positives, and then put in place the protections for the negatives to the greatest degree that we can, should be a good journey for everyone.
Yeah, and then, Chat GPT and those language models, are the rave these days. But, even the core AI that can be out there for sentiment analysis, right? To know if something is sounding positive or negative, or taking documents and turning it into data. You can just sense like, hey, if these status reports can be automatically kind of combined to know how you're doing as a portfolio of projects. Or there's so many signals inside of your environment. Maybe AI can start giving you early warning systems that says, hey, something seems off on this project because of the emails going out, the chats on the team, and like leadership can kind of get like, hey, feels bad over here type of sentiment that you maybe used to get in person, but in a hybrid environment or a remote environment, you don't walk past people to see that they're stressed out. I see the AI being able to be able to do that. How it's going to do that safely and ethically is going to be the biggest challenge overall. But it's that new stuff that it can take a guess at that may help, is where I also see it all coming together, just in Microsoft 365 as a whole.
Definitely.
Great. Thanks, John and Chris. $1 million question here, and this is a tack on for me. One of the big things that we've been hearing in the news from folks like Sam Altman, creator and CEO of OpenAI, is that AI is going to probably reduce a lot of jobs out there, a lot of kind of like repetitive tasks, customer service, stuff like that. How do you think that it'll overall affect kind of the work that we do today? Do you think that AI is going to be able to write a 100% accurate Power Platform job, whether it be through Power Automate or a Power App, or do you think that folks like us will still have to be engaged for that kind of thing?
Yeah, no, it's bad data in is going to keep bad data out. So there's a lot of risk initially and for years that the answers are just not good enough overall. You sense it. If you hit message boards and other things on the internet and discussions, you can see people answering incorrectly to a lot of answers out there on the internet as you're a professional and you kind of do what you do. So I don't think that changes. I also have this back from my mom. My mom, her career, she really was a receptionist in a lot of ways at organizations, and years back, right, that went from she had to answer the phone for leaders at the organization to take notes, to all these things leaders do themselves now, right? So her role just evolved, right? So she moved from this note taker, schedule maker, to a bookkeeper and accountant. So the jobs evolve and go into more value add overall. overall. And I think that's also what's going to happen. It's going to help pros like us go faster to get to the core of what we need to do, but it's not going to replace us, because there's still thought and strategy and things like that will be applied. And just the human brain is so complicated. I'm not too worried about AI for a while. It's going to help and make things different for sure, but it's going to be a long time.
Yeah, I would definitely agree, and for all the reasons that John said and more, that it inevitably will, yes, have that impact that Sam Altman advised, that it's going to affect certain career fields and all that. And just as John noted, that doesn't necessarily make it a bad thing, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it's hugely disruptive, because it's changing the landscape of what people do. And as a result, yeah, maybe it takes away some of those jobs. That doesn't mean those people are now forever going to work. It just means that the work that they do will be different. And it means that maybe some of the tedium, which is, I think, the most prominent use case for AI in all of our lives, not just with those fields that are affected by it, in a dramatic sense, it's hopefully going to allow us to do more sophisticated tasks that do benefit from the human brain and the complexity of the human brain that John just acknowledged, and not just, hey, write me this generic thing again that is the same thing over and over again, slightly different or whatever. Let's let machine learning take care of that, AI take care of that, while we focus on the more cognitive heavy workloads that are unique to humans, and allow us to be that much more productive and allow us to be that much more effective at our jobs. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting future. And if we look back in history, this happens every so often. I mean, the Industrial Revolution, I'm sure people would have said, oh, well, now there's machines to do it. How am I going to have people in the fields doing this or that or the other? Or when computers were invented, there was all these people that did all the calculations by hand and all these tabulations saying, oh, what's going to happen to my job? Yeah, we evolve and we adapt, and we leverage the strengths of these things, and ultimately are better for it in the end.
That brings us to the end of our podcast episode, in which we discussed significant issues about productivity and collaboration in today's digital landscape. We also investigated methods for cleaning up a cluttered environment, emphasizing the need for priority, organization, and the establishment of successful processes. In addition, we highlighted the frequency of Microsoft Teams retraining, advocating quarterly sessions or updates-driven training to guarantee your organization stays current. We also looked into the possibility of integrating Apsidien 365 with ServiceNow for request management, emphasized Teams' numerous capabilities beyond chat, and speculated on the future influence of AI on Teams strategy. For more information on Microsoft Teams, SharePoint, and Inspire, you can visit Microsoft's website, or of course, check out our back catalog of videos and podcast episodes. As always, if you have any questions or need help with implementing or managing any of these Microsoft 365 features, you can contact Virteva. We're a leading IT managed service provider and can help you with all of your IT needs. You can email us at letstalk@virteva.com or visit our website at www.virteva.com. Want even more Microsoft news? You can sign up for our monthly Microsoft 365 newsletter by visiting our website. The newsletter recaps a handful of topics on a monthly basis and keeps you in the loop about the newest news and announcements from Microsoft. Thank you again for watching the Virteva Let's Talk podcast, and if you made it this far, please don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons, and have a great rest of your day, and if you're in the United States, a great 4th of July weekend. Thank you.